Back in 1642, a war was sparked in England that influenced democracy for many years to come. Long before the war started in 1642, there were problems stemming from revolts in Scotland, and King Charles I tried his best to stop. There were also many instances where Charles I abused his power as king and neglected his policies as a monarch. In August 1642, Parliament declined King Charles I's request for money in an attempt of diplomacy. Parliament was debating whether the king was abusing his power, and came to the conclusion that he was, and that it had to put a stop to it. Because of this, King Charles I declared war on Parliament, and after 3 major battles, Parliament won the war, resulting in the economy and military developing exponentially, along with common folk having more power and freedom. The English civil wars are widely known to have started with Parliament declining King Charles I's request for money in August 1642, but in actuality, the conflict had sparked earlier with Scotland's Bishops' War from 1639 to 1640 and Ireland's Ulster Rebellion in 1641.
King Charles I was very reliant on Parliament for the money needed to stomp out these revolts. However, after getting the money, he quickly dissolved them in fear of their immense power over him.
Parliament was fed up with him constantly manipulating them to get a hold of these resources, so in an attempt to rebel against him, they declined his third request for money, which caused him to become angry, and he ended up accusing Parliament members of treason. Long after this had all happened, in November of 1688, there was a revolution in England that resulted in no bloodshed at all, after which Parliament had become the highest power in England. This was known as the Glorious Revolution. Seeing how King Charles I dissolved Parliament as they were supplying him with his needs shows his tyrannical rule. Also, back in 1215, there was a treaty signed to limit the monarch's power over nations, known as the Magna Carta. Charles I's actions and his rule directly disobeyed what was written and agreed to in the Magna Carta. After accusing Parliament of treason, he attempted to arrest members of Parliament for treason via trial. His attempt had failed, and Charles I fled London and established his court in York. Political propaganda was coming from both sides of the conflict. While this is all happening, both sides were forming their armies. During the First War, whenever there was an advantage on either side, none of them enjoyed it and were against it.
After the First Civil War, there was an increase in taxes, debates about war, and Parliament, and loyalists to the king, all of which caused the Second Civil War. During the Second Civil War, Parliament had to use their army to fight people loyal to the king, known as royalists.
After the Second Civil War had ended, King Charles I was beheaded in the middle of town and caused an uproar with the Scottish Parliament. The Scots Parliament had contacted Charles I's son to sign a covenant, which in turn sparked the Third Civil War. The English Parliament went to war with the Scots Parliament, and the English Parliament was in turn victorious. After the Third Civil War, the English Parliament had to introduce a new type of government due to the multiple controversies involving the English Parliament, King Charles I's beheading, and the increase in taxes.
In 1651, after the Third War had ended, Parliament had abolished the monarchy and introduced a new democratic government called the Commonwealth of England, where people had power over the government, and they also introduced religious toleration.
Limitations to monarchy and religious toleration are ideals that are still in practice to this day. Parliament had decided to create the Commonwealth of England as they believed a monarchy had always created problems for government and for the nation. With this new type of government, the citizens had power to elect government officials, and they had power over their own government. The Commonwealth of England heavily influenced modern democracy, which is used in many countries today, including Britain, the United States, etc. These wars had also helped develop the modern military and economy. Without the English Civil Wars, modern democracy would be vastly different, or in certain circumstances, not even exist. In conclusion, after the English Parliament declined King Charles I's request for money to stop up revolts in Scotland and Ireland, King Charles I accused him of treason and started a war with Parliament. Parliament being victorious resulted in several developments for the military and economy, as well as introducing a democratic government to English nations. The king's views of the revolts in Scotland and Ireland sparked the fire for the Civil War, so he and Parliament went to war due to disagreements, resulting in the English Parliament coming out victorious in the war, and introducing personal freedom and rights to the citizens. The English Parliament debated on whether it was safe to disobey the king, and they decided to go with a diplomatic approach to it, which ended up making Charles I upset. This historical event was significant for the development of modern democracy, military, and economy.